Maxed Out Man, helping you become the man you were made to be.
Hey guys, it's Kevin Davis from the Maxed Out Man podcast. It's episode number 25. I'm here with Dr. Anthony Balduzzi, if you want. He's the founder of the Fit Father Project, and I can't tell you how excited I am to have this conversation. I love talking to men that are kind of aligned with my own values, my own, things that I believe in. And honestly, I'm just excited to be able to learn more from you. You're a little bit, you're obviously more contemporary than I am with all the fitness stuff. So I'm super excited to have you. Thanks for coming on board.
Kevin, thanks for having me.
Hey, give me your, I think you don't necessarily have to give me your full resume, but give me your backstory, how you got into this. I know I was reading on your website, there's a little bit of a tragic story there, but a great outcome. So I'd love to hear more about kind of who you are and what the Fit Father Project is and everything.
Sure. Well, I think I grew up like most kids. I didn't dream of becoming a doctor per se. I liked being outside, riding my bike, playing sports, getting in trouble in the neighborhood, all that stuff. But what was unique about my childhood is I watched my dad and saw the consequences of what happened when a man works really hard to take care of his family, but neglects his health, puts it on the back burner. So that's what he did. He busted his butt, put food on the table. He worked a job as eventually got up the corporate ladder to be VP of a computer leasing company. And it was like nights sleeping at the office, lots of stress. And, that wasn't the guy he was from a young age. He played football and stuff, but, priorities shift when you become a family man. And unfortunately for him, like things hit ahead really quickly. It was in his late 30s when he was diagnosed with cancer. He had a seizure one day and fell down. And I remember just like seeing my dad in that kind of state, just like shook me to my core. And then over the course of years, he had 2 brain surgeries, multiple chemotherapy, radiation treatments. And I watched my dad like just deteriorate in front of my eyes. And he eventually died when he was 42 years old.
Oh man.
Right? I mean, crazy how young that is when, you get around that age and you're like, that's just like, I guess the beginning of life in some sense.
Yeah.
And I was 9 at the time watching that happen. And it impressed in my mind, like so many valuable lessons, outside of the pain of what that's like and the destabilizing force, but also the opportunity, I guess, in some sense to rise and become the hero of my story. I got to learn that health is for us guys is the foundation of what we love. And insofar as we pursue other things, like health is the bedrock of that, because when we lose the health, we lose our ability to provide, we lose our time with our families, we lose our ability to pursue our hobbies. And so I decided from a young age that I wanted to figure out how to be healthy. And not that I knew exactly what that was being so young, but my mom on my 10th birthday did gift me a pair of my dad's dumbbells, and I started to train. I do some push-ups. I hit them under my bed with a little Walkman kind of thing. And I put on some music and, do my exercises at night. And I found as I was exercising, it was healing for me on many levels. I was getting stronger, but I was also maybe processing some emotion. I was also gaining a sense of personal power because as I trained, I got stronger. I felt better. And I also realized when I was like sprinting down the block at night and, just exerting myself, it was easier to feel good and not feel so sad. And so that like lights went off in my young mind. I'm like, there's something to this. Like, I just really want to pursue this. So went into high school and I had a privilege, I guess, in some sense of going to an all boys Catholic high school. The drawback is there's no girls. The good thing is it was a very like good academic and sports school. And it was cool to like lift weights and get big. And so that's what I was into. I started packing my lunch, carrying around my water and, trying to get really big and strong. And I was able to do that. And as I got bigger and stronger, I guess as a young man, like I got respect from my friends. They started asking me, dude, how do I do this? So I was the beginning of like personal training by just trying to teach people the things that I was learning and devouring. And I'm an intellectual guy. I love to read and learn some of the science of these things. So I was just like reading all these books and then the muscle magazines and all those things. And it was so cool because what started initially as this was like a turn as like personal tragedy now turned into something that was a legitimate passion for me early in life that gave me a sense of purpose and a way to serve and to help some people.
Right.
Now, I went to university and I picked my university because I went to my guidance counselor and I said, tell me the best school you think I can get into that also has an amazing gym. And we stumbled upon the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. And I went there. And when I went there with my mom who took me, there was a poster in the gym of like a bodybuilding show. It was the Mr. Pennsylvania bodybuilding show. I'm like, Mom, I'm going to win that bodybuilding show one day. And so I ended up going to school and I do my first bodybuilding show freshman year. I obviously did not win, but I did it, and it was a really cool experience. But I came back the second year after more intense training and having so much dedication. I won the bodybuilding show as a sophomore and again as a senior. And my foray into bodybuilding at a young age, and I guess at this point in like my 20s, was a really cool and powerful experience for me, because I learned how to like take all these things I was learning on nutrition, sleep, exercise, supplementation, and with the name of this podcast, bring them to the max. Like, how do you push pedal to the metal and learn how to take things very far? And I did that. And I had the resiliency of a young man at that time to be able to like train like a maniac and eat tons of food and do all that. And,
a natural testosterone level of like 1 billion.
Exactly. Right. All the factors that were like very, very valuable at that point. And at the same time, I was also starting to shape up and see how I could start to package all this knowledge that I'd gained personally and start to like transmit it to people. And I was looking around at all these, people with internet platforms, like a guy like a Tony Robbins was someone who, when I was healing, was listening to his motivational tapes. And so was my mom, going through the experience of raising kids as a single mom. And so I'm like, man, that's kind of cool. I guess you can just help people with your knowledge. So there was some entrepreneurial gears that started to turn at this time. And I started doing my first websites around post-college, and I was like doing summaries of health books I was reading, starting to learn how to blog and create some stuff online. So that was a significant part of my journey, because this kind of evolves into what is now Fit Father Project, which is this mission to help dads. And I went to naturopathic medical school after that. And when I got to medical school, I saw so many people like my dad. They didn't always have cancer, but it was the same exact scenario. It's like, I'm busy, lots of pressures. I feel like my health is something I can't really juggle and manage. So I just don't exercise, and I'm stressed. So I eat the wrong foods, and I'm not sleeping great. And my kids are demanding. Same story. It just manifests for us in different ways. And so I want to help people fix that. Particularly, I want to help people like my dad fix that, because of my deep personal connection to that story, because there's a story that I'd lived. And so I started helping people in medical school. And then I realized the common themes and started to, again, package that stuff into Fit Father Project, which now exists. Like 10 years later, we've run over 50,000 guys in over 100 countries through the program. Wow. And they've lost hundreds of thousands of pounds and gotten great results. But it all started in these layers. And I guess the last significant two things I'll share is I am a dad, have a beautiful daughter, and this is just it has so much more purpose to fitness now than just like looking good and being, fit and healthy and like I cared about when I was in my 20s. And one of the big turns in my life that led to this was in my last year of medical school. I went on a skiing trip with one of my close friends, Barrick, and we were skiing like idiots. We're both very good skiers, but with total ego, just like blasting. And I had an intuition that day that it should slow down or something bad was going to happen, but I totally ignored that. And we were in Durango, Colorado, and there was one of these ski runs where it was a very steep hill that you can absolutely ski if you like stop and dig some edges in. But like a maniac, I was jumping a little bit at the top of that hill at high speed, so you just sort of float down 15 to 20 feet. And I did it once and go back up the lift to do it again. Except the second time I do this, like the skis kind of get a little crossed up in the air and I land poorly. The skis blow off my feet, probably going 30 miles per hour. And I'm just getting thrashed, tumbling. And I end up slamming into a tree at that full speed and shatter my right leg, break my arm, and almost died in that moment. Like almost life-ending accident, all because of like my ego. And that set off a series of experiences of like basically having to learn to walk again, getting 6 surgeries over 6 years, having to get a leg lengthening surgery, and kind of become a lot more interior. Like it dissolved the big parts of my ego that was so tied to like what I looked like. I had to confront the ideas of pain and mortality and weakness and debility. I learned so many lessons through that I guess shaped me on the inner spiritual side of things as well. And now I'm here today with you, Kevin, as a man, like on a mission to share like good word. And the good word is that like dads, no matter your age or where you're at right now, you can make progress and get back into great health. Like we've had guys who are like 200 pounds overweight in their 50s, like get that weight off. It takes tremendous dedication and a good plan, but it's possible. And like, if you look around at what's going on in the world, prescription medications are like candy right now. Half of guys are overweight or obese. Low T is more rampant than it should be just based off of like age decline. Guys are addicted. Guys are having problems with marriages, and it's all connected, right? This is like a mind, body, spirit experience that we're having. And I definitely have a lot of like unique skills in helping people like get aligned, getting that body piece aligned, which inherently requires getting the spirit and the mental piece aligned, because it's as a full body, full court press thing.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I've got this, fit at every age thing on the back, and it's not fit at any age. It's literally be fit at any age. When I was a trainer, and what you just described, the last part, and there's a ton to unpack in all that you just said, but the last part about having it a full body thing, like that's kind of what I wanted to do with Maxed Out Man and the whole project is I want to talk about marriage and family and kids and fitness and finances and entrepreneurship and kind of all of that stuff. But the fitness component is almost one of those things like the spiritual side, inner peace that drives so much of everything else. Now let me ask you, was your dad, did they trace the issues with your dad to specific lifestyle stuff?
We know right now, look, cancer is expected. It's expected that 1 out of 2 guys gets cancer by 2050. Wow. Right. And it's not just listen, this is environmental pressures. We know that stress crushes your immune system. The immune systems are the sentinels of our bodies. And we're constantly being exposed to different kind of environmental factors that are causing damages and breaks to our DNA. Some people have genetic predispositions. There's environmental toxins and chemicals as well as that cause cancers, certain foods and additives and stuff like that are linked to cancers. For whatever the reason, the combination of my dad's behaviors and the environment that he was in led to him having that. But whether it's cancer or the slowed buildup of heart disease or blood sugar dysregulation, point is our inputs are gonna create problems down the line. And right now there are a lot of pressures in our society that it's really easy. If you choose the default path to do what everyone else is doing, you're gonna get the results are unhealthy, unwell, and the state of your body is also the clarity of your mind. The two things are completely connected. Our brains are sitting in this neurochemical soup that is effectively created by the things we're ingesting and then the habits and the relationships we have to those things. So it's so connected. And I'll say this too, what's unique about the physical aspect is to have a good, healthy body requires certain disciplines and daily actions. It requires you having routines around putting good foods into your body. It requires you having some kind of schedule and commitment to an exercise or movement practice. And that's the scaffolding of your life. That because the stuff that the richness is our family. It's the ornaments, it's the memories, it's the creation, it's the value, the service. But those are the real rich things, but it hangs on the scaffolding because we know when we're not sleeping well or eating the wrong kinds of foods, we're just not showing up with those other areas. Everything's not colored in the same way of connection. And then the spirituality, how that's so tied to the body, in my opinion and experience, is when we feel like we're enslaved by something, when we feel like we're out of control, something has power or dominion over us, or if we have that little voice inside that knows that we're not living in alignment with what we feel like is our highest path, that's where there's spiritual distance. And regardless of someone's exact faith or beliefs, you can quote scripture that the body is the temple of the Holy Spirit kind of things. I'll also share, I know when I'm on my health routines, my prayer and my meditation practice is so much deeper, more clear and connected. I feel so much more joyful. So it's all one game. And I think that's part of the mental trap that guys fall into. Is I think a lot of guys think of health and fitness as something that they'll find time to get to. Yeah. It's 100%. Right. It's just maybe I'll find time to get to that, but we got to collapse that from a separate circle to be this is foundational. Now, respect to our boundaries and limitations, right? We do have busy schedules. We can't always we can't always get it in with if the plan is I need to exercise for an hour a day, but you're going to eat. You're going to be eating meals any day. How can we slide in better in class options that don't require a lot of thinking? Okay, you can't work out. Could you do 5 minutes of XYZ? We can talk about strategies of getting things in. There's ways to do it for even the busiest of guys. It's partly a matter of realizing how important this stuff is and making a deeper neuroassociation and commitment. That's why we're called the Fit Father Project and not the Fit Man Project. For many people, it's the family is one deep motivating reason to to be around for them. Because a lot of us guys can be totally self-destructive. We can drink ourselves to death. We can do bad things, whatever, because we're willing to do things. But I guess when this conversation becomes larger than just us, certainly for our maxed out life and performance, but for the impact it'll have on our kids, on our mission, on our connection to God, now it becomes a more motivating and more important conversation. And I hope that my dad's life does frame what could happen, but also the promise of what doesn't have to happen too. Yeah, my wife's uncle died at 37,
and it was very, very similar, but like he literally had a heart attack in a hot tub, which is, you know, if your blood pressure is already off the charts, that's a good place to have a heart attack. But yeah, it's interesting because I felt like the delineation for me, you know, social media can be a blessing and a curse. But when I got to be in my early 40s, and that was when I was kind of my weight, you know, I was a personal trainer, super fit, all that stuff younger. And then over time, it's kind of gone up and down. We all go through those cycles of when our priorities are out of line, or when I ended up having some testosterone issues that were kind of unrelated to, like it is more of a genetic thing that I went through. And I actually, you know, full disclosure, I actually have only one functional testicle because of a motorcycle accident.
Dang.
So that actually, what was interesting, I didn't really track that until I had a conversation with someone just recently, and I've been on TRT for a couple of years. But I didn't actually track that could be a source of, and I was like in the 250s, 260s.
Yeah, you're tanked.
You know, I was tanked. So that, you know, TRT changed my life. But what I was saying is that, like, you get to on social media, and when you start to get in that early 40s range, you start going, I went to high school with that guy. Look how old that guy is. Like, you know, and it's because they tend not to take care of themselves and have kind of an Al Bundy kind of, you know, I was this great athlete in high school or whatever. I'm interested in knowing how many people that you've worked with, how many men that you've worked with, dads you've worked with. It seems like there's this kind of philosophical understanding that men don't really care when they get to be in that 35, 40, 45 range. Do you find that, or do you think that's just complete BS? You know, because there's this idea of like this big, you know, beer belly guy, this whole stupid dad bod thing that is the, you know, lie of our current generation, that's healthy and that's sexy and all that stuff. Like, are you seeing that? I'm curious, like the philosophical side of things.
Yeah, I think humans are very, very good at becoming complacent, but not like truly happy. I think we're good with going around with the tide and the curve, and everyone else is doing it. And like, there's the bias again, that change takes work, right? It requires like voluntarily taking on pain, making commitments to carve things out, to do something new. So we have this inertia, status quo effect that's reinforced by culture, that a lot of guys are just kind of caught in the ebb. But I know that deep down, every person who is overweight, every person who takes a shower in the morning and looks at their body, and like, just there's something even subconscious there being like, I know this is not the best version and I wish I could do better. And there's so many stages of that. Some guys look at that and respond as like, okay, I'm finally going to do better. I'm going to take it again. I'm going to try again. Other guys have the mental script of like, oh, I'm too far gone. Screw it. It's not even worth it anymore. You know, I think a lot of guys get spurs through the health scares, bad blood work, heart stuff for sure, but also through like marriages that are not going great, losing intimacy, or even like those that do dissolve or don't work well can be a kickstart, because a guy gets out there and is like, holy crap, am I going to be alone for the rest of my life? Look at me. I got to like start to get my stuff together. Many impetuses, but I guess the simple answer to your question is like, no, I think we have a deep calling inside of us to feel like we're maxed out, which is like fully expressed, which means to become the best we can be mentally, emotionally, and physically. And again, that meets at every age, but we certainly know the best we can be is not wearing 30, 40, 50, 100 pounds of extra weight. And I guess I'll say it's like, we look around, it's not that it's not easy to do that. It's absolutely easy to do that. That might even be the default today. The food is crap. We're lazier than ever. Like, there's a lot of environmental factors, estrogens, toxicants that are not good for our bodies. Like, a lot of things are tough. So then it comes down to every man must make a deep commitment, especially when the margin of error gets smaller in your 40s. Metabolism slows down. You don't recover as well from exercise, easier to gain weight, busier than ever, you know, absolutely in a role of being a provider and putting other people in front of you. Like, you need to understand why this stuff is absolutely vital. You need to connect this to your core values. And if you haven't like done one of these actual exercises where you take like 30 minutes, you put on some music that you like really inspires you and gets you going, and you write down like what your core values in life are, you know, business success, God, family, integrity. And then you actually really think and ponder about how your health and your behaviors with nutrition, sleep, and exercise connects to every single one of those. And then you future pace out there. What's going to happen if I make no changes and keep on going exactly as I am? Where does my life end up looking like? What happens if I do make some changes? And like that gap of that change, that cost, what do I think it's going to require? Well, it's going to require shopping for new foods and not ordering Uber Eats as much for the family. It's going to require having a conversation with my wife about what we're feeding for dinner. It's going to require me joining a gym or carving out 3 times a week for some exercise. Like, are those costs worth it? So this is the internal conversation, because there's an abundance of fitness information out there. Like you said it, you were legitimately a personal trainer. You have a degree in exercise physiology, but you got out of shape. It wasn't due to a lack of knowledge. It was due to the rhythms and the pressures and the momentum of just your life moving.
Yeah.
So we need to get this emotive, deep aspect connected powerfully. And then we actually do that in our program. Before people read the meal plan, they create one of these mission statements and they do this and they print it out. They take it very seriously, and it creates a sacred container for commitment. Because I think just like how do you make change is important as like what to eat. And I'm sure we'll get into that as well, and how to exercise after 40. But like how a rocket launches into space is it gathers up all this energy in the form of fuel and then has to escape gravity, big blast off. Then when it gets out above gravity and into orbit, it's able to be a lot easier. It can glide and make micro adjustments, doesn't need as much fuel. But if you're looking to change, you got to store up the fuel. And the way you store up fuel is partly that emotional power of being like, okay, and like enough's enough. This is why I'm connecting this to the deepest parts of me. It's not just physical. You also get fuel in the form of clarity. Like, okay, this is the nutrition plan and approach I'm going to follow. This is the exercise approach I'm going to follow. And then you ideally surround yourself with like-minded men, like men in brotherhood and community, like listening to motivational stuff like this, or getting in person, like, or a part of our Fit Father brotherhood. Like that is fuel. Like iron sharpens iron. Like we get around people that are trying to live a maxed out life. Like naturally we resonate with that. We rise to the occasion. That's something cool about the human spirit. So all that stuff, the psychological, emotional, spiritual stuff, is just as important in my opinion as like the tactics.
Yeah, because I think, so many of these guys, they put so much effort into their work or their hobbies or whatever, and they're not like, they don't equate that if they just had better health, they would feel better and be able to perform all of those activities and like, be a better father, like the Fit Father Project, but be a better husband, a better worker. You have more productivity. You feel better, as a guy that has exercised his whole life, and like yourself, you go a week. First of all, what actually happens to you physiologically when you skip, like if you're on vacation, you have to not lift weights, which we always try to find a gym. But when you do that and you kind of have that lack of soreness in your muscles or that tightness, I always like feel like I just feel gross and unhealthy. Not gross like, oh, I'm 50 pounds overweight or whatever for myself, but just that lower energy and that motivation and all that. And then if we eat, have a couple of days of crap food, which we try, when you travel, it's just how it is. Yeah. I sit and I think to myself, I've said this to my wife, I'm like, do people that eat like this feel like this all the time? Because it's just that heaviness, and you can feel all of that stuff that's running through your GI tract, and it feels like it's in your blood because it's screwing up your blood sugar and all that. And so having that motivation to really say, I'm going to put just as much effort into, or more effort into, getting fit and staying fit, eating good food, getting decent sleep, as I do everything else in my life. It seems like there's this missing link between that mentality.
For sure. And those stuff, it gives you energy. Like literally all these inputs that we just talked about, like good sleep habits and hygiene gives you energy. Consistent strength training gives you energy. And then like nutrition, right? Regardless if you want to make the investment to like go start exercising, I'm sure people listening to this are certainly exercising to some extent. Like you're going to have to eat. You're going to eat every day unless you're intentionally fasting for health purposes, which has benefits too. And we can talk about that if you'd like to go there. Nutrition strategies, I think they're very relevant for guys. Is the most successful guys that I know is they have a standardized first meal of the day. Like the first thing you have for breakfast, it's standardized. It's something that is quick, convenient, lots of good protein, healthy fats, fills you up. Like, do you have like a go-to breakfast, Kevin?
I literally have eaten the exact same breakfast for probably 18 months, other than when I'm not at the house. I have egg whites, eggs, and I basically make like a frittata. I throw a potato in there and put eggs and egg whites over it, and then I'm good.
Okay, so check that out. So there's a couple categories, and one of them is egg-based recipes, and I'll go over them that like guys need to like dial this in. The benefit is you get something super nutritious in the morning that gives you energy, keeps your blood sugar stable. It's also a momentum shifter because
Yeah.
regardless of what happened yesterday, okay, you ate way too much, you had family dinner, you had pizza and a beer. Like today, you have a new way to shift momentum because it's fine if you have a meal that wasn't good. It's not fine if you have a week of it, let alone a year of it, right? So it's about constantly shifting momentum. That's what nutrition's largely about. So standardize that first meal for that. Egg-based recipes are good. It could be a mix of egg whites and whole eggs. I recommend that guys buy high quality eggs. Like spend more for your eggs, get the nice yolk that's really orange. It has a lot of beneficial compounds in it that are good, vitamins, minerals, etc.
My wife is getting ready. She's been wanting to do chickens. Our neighbors have chickens. And just side note about that you can actually see the difference. She does a lot of pastry. She's a kind of a hobbyist pastry chef. And if she's making like creme brulee or something that's very, very yolk based, she will get, because we go through like 120 eggs a week. So that's a lot of eggs. So she'll get those eggs that are literally from our neighbors' chickens that have just been, they just laid them a couple of days ago. And the richness that you can see even in the yolk-based pastry stuff is like, holy cow. Yeah. You can just see how much richer it is.
And anything that is colored like that in nature, like these are the beneficial compounds that our bodies have. Those are like carotenoids or in the cloth compound, like the vitamin A's, and astaxanthin, zeaxanthin. These are the things that keep our heart healthy. They're good for hormone production, and the yolks are really powerful. Also for cognition and memory, there's choline in the yolk is very good. So egg-based recipes are fine. You can do 3 sunny side up, scrambled eggs, frittata kind of style, cool. Other option is like shakes and smoothies, awesome. Like if you get a protein powder that you love and you throw that in there with some kind of like milk that you tolerate well, it could be dairy or non-dairy milk, throw in some like organic blueberries, some greens, maybe some hemp seeds, chia seeds, chocolate, cacao powder. You blend that sucker up. It's going to be like under 500 calories, keep your blood sugar super stable, easy to digest. And you can still have like other kinds of variety food for dinner, but like that's a go-to shake. A lot of guys are super successful with like protein smoothies in the morning. Tastes good. You can take it on the go. You can still fast, whatever, like really good. If you're like more like an oatmeal kind of person, you can make some oatmeal power oats, overnight oats with a whole bunch of cool stuff in there. Regardless, like dial in your meal number one. But I think even before that, another thing that I think a lot of guys could do is start to doing a morning rehydration ritual immediately upon waking up, 20 to 32 ounces of water. And ideally you get some minerals in there. So it could be as simple as using something like some kind of salt, like a Himalayan salt or a Celtic sea salt, or you could get a little more fancy and get a trace mineral drops or some kind of electrolyte powder that's not full of crap, but like gives your body some of these minerals. Like we need these minerals. They're just as important as the vitamins for the hydration. So
and do you recommend like the BCA? I do. I like my BCAAs, and we have some that I carry under Max Up Man, but I also have some that I use from other manufacturers. So I kind of look for how much crap is in it. Yeah. But it's also, that's kind of electrolytes and,
I think BCAA powders are like, they have their place. It wouldn't necessarily, in my opinion, be like a first thing in the morning kind of thing. I think it's like, unless you're doing it for fitness purposes, you're on a diet. So those who are probably familiar, BCAAs are branched chain amino acids. It's a particular family of 4 amino acids that are really good for increasing protein synthesis. They're good for muscle building. Leucine being one of those BCAAs. That's a big trigger for muscle protein synthesis. Interesting thing about BCAAs is they do stimulate insulin. They're insulinogenic amino acids. So for those wanting to stay in a fasted state and maybe in the morning, it might not be the ideal thing to have. But if you're doing morning training that's very hard and heavy and you are already lean, BCAAs could be a fine thing in the morning. But for overall health purposes, I wouldn't say people just do a BCAA in the morning just for shits. But if you did a morning shake though, and you're actually having carbohydrates and stuff in there, adding some additional BCAAs in there is good. But if you're just doing it in the water, I would personally say save it for later.
Because I usually just do plain water in the morning. I kind of do this prayer, gratitude, talk to God in the morning before I get out of bed, drink my water. Yep. Then I have my breakfast, and then with my breakfast, I'm typically doing like a red superfood and I throw in some creatine, because I know creatine's a nootropic and water uptake and all that. So that typically is kind of my part of my morning routine. I'm doing cold plunge and sauna, and I go out and walk when it's nice. And I don't do heavy cardio in the morning because I that helps me kind of clear my head. But keep going with the breakfast stuff. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, it's perfect. And you kind of nailed it. I mean, we'll just hop around this whole like morning section because I think it's important for guys. You win the morning, you have that momentum for the day. So like you wake up and you rehydrate. We talked about that. What you mentioned that you do intuitively is also just as important, if possible, for a guy's schedule, is to get outside and do some kind of light movement. I'm not talking about cardio, but like walk, get the lymphatic system going, start breathing through your nose, and ideally get some sunshine on your skin, but certainly in your eyes. Like we're now learning so much about the circadian rhythm and like sleep's important, but like good sleep starts with good morning sunshine exposure. When our eyes get exposed to that particular morning sun before the sun's too high, that sun's kicking off a lot of this near infrared radiation. And a lot of that light that hits our eyes too also produces serotonin, which is that feel good, make us positive. So imagine starting your day off a little dose of like serotonin that you naturally create from being in contact visually with the sun. Super cool. And then
I normally would wear sunglasses, but I've actually, over the last 6 to 9 months or so, I've actually made a conscious effort. I live in Montana, so I have to do a lot of treadmill because we have 6 months, of winter. So it's real, I'm going to fall on my ass or there's, minus 40 in the wintertime. But during this time of year, like I make a conscious effort to not wear sunglasses because mine are polarized and I want to get that sunlight in. And so that's one thing I think that getting that sunlight, that my morning routine this time of year, and I love the beach. We go to the beach in the wintertime. I wish that I could simulate that same feeling on the treadmill that I get outside this time of year.
Yeah, for sure. And like I agree. And the morning sun is like different than the high up sun, very bright. Wear your sunglasses during the day, but get a little morning sun exposure. And the same thing goes with sunset. Like when the sun looks red, when it's starting to set, like it's kicking off that red spectrum of light, and that red light has biological effects. Good for our skin and connective tissue, good for our mitochondria. That's why all these people are doing red lights and infrared saunas and things like this. And we can talk about that if you like as well. Like those are beneficial, but light is a powerful bioregulator. So if you can get that light in the morning, that's going to help you out a lot. And then with that morning meal, I'm a big fan of all guys taking creatine if you can. I think it works for almost all guys. The only other considerations, and like even with people with kidney disease, like check with your doctor. Like there were case studies with people with like one kidney that can take creatine. And if you're taking the 3 to 5 grams a day, like this low maintenance dose, it's just like generally super good, maintains muscle mass, good for cognition, more ATP, all good. Supplements in the morning that could be good if you're having the fat for that breakfast with like the eggs and stuff. Also a good idea to get some vitamin D. I know we're getting some from the sun, but probably ideal for guys to take some supplemental. They've shown that guys with low vitamin D levels have low testosterone levels and low immune function. So if like you're looking to naturally boost T, like D is very, very helpful for that.
Well, and they talked about like even with the COVID stuff, they actually showed, which got all of the science behind vitamin D got completely ignored. But they were talking about because here in Montana, it's like in the wintertime, it's like 85% of the people that live here have low vitamin D levels.
It's crazy, man.
Serum vitamin D. But I don't take a vitamin D, which I probably should.
Well, so it's interesting. So we make vitamin D from the sun, right? Well, what's crazy is that the same UV radiation, the UVB that comes from the sun, the same stuff that gives us skin cancer, is the only aspect of the sunlight that makes us produce vitamin D.
Interesting.
Yeah, right. So like even the morning sun, unfortunately, doesn't have much UVA, UVB just based on the position of the sun and its rising. Like we don't get much UV exposure. It's only when the sun gets really overhead that we get a lot of the UVB. The UVB is what makes us produce vitamin D, our skin. So, I think it's like for guys who are getting regular blood work, like a serum vitamin D test once or twice a year is a good idea. And then seasonally, if you live in a cold place like you do, like just take 5,000 IUs. You can take it like forever and there's really no drawback to it.
Well, and there's some, like I've heard sometimes that like what my wife does is she actually super loads once a week.
That works too.
So on Saturdays she takes like, I don't know, 25,000 IUs or whatever it is. And then, cause it's fat soluble, right? ADE and K.
You got it.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of guys too, like heart disease is like, besides cancer, is like the number one killer of men, like that combination. And as we get older, like we get stiffer largely, exercise and movement is a way to offset that. We got to keep blood flow. We got to keep like the spine healthy, but like things get calcified. Calcification is our body deposits calcium to make things stiffer in response to inflammation. And when our arteries get more stiff, this is when we have blood pressure problems. We want that nice elastic thing. And there's a cool vitamin K2, which is a special form of vitamin K. And one of its jobs is actually to clear calcium deposition from the arteries. it actually can decalcify arteries. And K2 is found in like some interesting places in some fermented foods, butter, like chicken skin, weird places, but it's a good thing to get with your D. If you're going to get a vitamin D supplement, get a D3 K2 combo.
Yeah, and I think most of them have that now. The ones,
the good ones do.
Yeah,
You can buy a certain D by itself. You might as well get the K2 and get the calcification benefits. And the other thing too for guys, like get an omega-3 fatty acid supplement, high quality one, like good anti-inflammatory, good for heart health, good for your brain health. Like I think in terms of like supplements are supplemental, but I think the core stack we tell guys in Fit Father Project to do for good health would be like a D3, K2, an omega-3. It would be probably some kind of like, I'm a believer in a low dose multivitamin of some sort. It doesn't need to be anything crazy, but like might as well cover your bases. Like there's so many products out there. It could be a red, super greens, like something that's got a lot of cool stuff in there that you can like scoop in, and it's an insurance policy. You don't have to think about it. I think a quality protein powder is a valuable tool. You can use those to make shakes. It could be meal replacement post-workout. That's very good. And then perhaps something that's a good natural anti-inflammatory, like a curcumin turmeric.
I take turmeric, just the little capsules.
And then maybe a probiotic too. Like, although eating some kinds of foods, the gut health is important. So imagine a morning routine where you just like get those things in with your standardized breakfast. You obviously do that like in your plan. Like if a guy doesn't have that in place, that's a huge area for optimization. And then like later on in dinner, that's when you can have a lot more variety. Like you're eating stuff with your family, like try to keep it clean. But like if you standardize that first meal of the day, and ideally lunch is also decently standardized, it's like protein on greens kind of scenario, or, you know, just like protein forward with veggies. It could even be a sandwich as long as your bread is not bullshit and you know you can tolerate some kind of wheat. Sprouted organic bread or something like that, or you have options, but standardize those first 1 to 2 meals of the day, and then have a more flexible dinner with your family. You just do that, like you have good structure and scaffolding to give you stable blood sugar. I'll tell guys like stop snacking, stop mindless eating in between meals. Our bodies are meant to have discrete periods of feeding where like food comes in, digestive process happens, insulin works, blood sugar gets stable. Don't mess with it for 4 or 5 hours. You know, just like let it go. So this is where like guys who like are constantly grazing and snacking on things throughout the day are actually like dysregulating their blood sugar, and actually training the brain as well to release more of these pulsatile secretions of the ghrelin hunger hormone, which makes you hungry more often. So when you eat more meals, you have more times to potentially mess up, as well as you get more hungry, as well as you dysregulate your sugar. And so the stability of your blood sugar is largely going to be what your energy levels are like. And we also know that in terms of aging, there are these compounds called advanced glycation end products, AGEs, which is a very like fitting name for what they are. Basically, what we know is like it's sugar that goes around throughout the body and sticks to different kinds of proteins, and it messes everything up. It makes it's really bad. It just like it creates damage to DNA. It makes sure that things don't work really well. And the way that we get more glycation in these AGEs is by eating like really crappy foods that we all know are unhealthy, as well as spiking our blood sugar as much as possible. So for those that want to live a long, healthy life, you want to have blood sugar be like as stable as possible and not spike it all the time. And so this does not necessarily mean you need to go like keto and never have like a carbohydrate again. Like you can have rice and sweet potatoes and all these things, but like have them in moderate balanced proportions. Another good benefit of strength training is it makes you more insulin sensitive, makes your body more receptive to carbohydrates. When you strength train, you can eat carbs and it functions way better in a body that's not exercising or resistance training and eating carbohydrates. So the blood sugar regulation is a massive thing. And then I also think guys should get into some kind of fasting. I'm not saying you need to fast every day, but like a dinner to dinner fast once per week is a powerful tool, you know, for mental, physical, and spiritual benefits. Like just like have dinner today and don't eat until dinner tomorrow. Drink water, coffee, teas, whatever, just non-caloric beverages. And you're going to sensitize your insulin. Your growth hormone goes up a ton while you're fasting. You're giving your body a break from food. So it actually breaks down a lot of these damaged proteins that build up from regular metabolism. So, you know, here's the thing, over 40, the margin of error is smaller. We need to learn, we need to implement more of these tools. And if we do that, we can, the way we're aging versus other people's aging, these start to diverge very, very massively.
Yeah, I mean, God, that's so much great information. I try to do quite a bit of that. Where are you landing? So, you know, we're talking about like, no carnivore, you don't need to do keto or all that. My typical diet is pretty heavily meat based. I'm not my wife is a baker. She makes her own home, she makes all of her stuff from scratch, which is great. So I have like sourdough bread and those kind of things, but I don't typically, I'm not a huge vegetable guy, which I know can be bad, but like I take fiber supplements and that kind of thing to kind of get that. Where are you landing on that with, everything's a fad, right? I said a long time ago, I wish back in the early 2000s, I had no ethics or morals, because I probably could be a billionaire by now with all the fad, Tony Littles and Susan Powders and all those people that made us super fat. But, what is your basic recommendation for just generalized dietary intake?
100%. And I'll actually comment on yours first as we kind of work into that question. Like, it's pretty clear now that you don't need to eat vegetables to be healthy. And in fact, there are certain vegetables that are problematic for us. Like, not all things want to be eaten. Certain vegetables, don't agree with people individually. Like, we have our own unique sets of like sensitivities. Like, you eat a food, you notice that you feel bloated, or you feel like crap, or you feel mucusy. Like, we all kind of figure out our own unique food sensitivities. Also, there's a lot of vegetables that are high in these things called oxalates. You're going to hear people talk a lot more about this. Like, spinach is high in oxalates and other things like this. And these can get deposited in our tissues and they can cause a whole bunch of problems. So like, the carnivore people are basically like, yo, let's just eat meat. Let's just have high fat, high protein, no vegetables, we're going to be fine. Now, there's a grain of truth to that, because animal proteins and animal products like have a lot of nutrients loaded into them. They're avoiding a lot of the inflammatory carbohydrates. They're avoiding a lot of the blood sugar crap that you're getting. And you're just avoiding a lot of the issues that come along with those kinds of foods. At the same time, we have a digestive tract that is not just like us. It is all these commensal bacteria and microbes that live with us, bacteria, viruses, and fungi. And those guys do like to ferment fibers. And so they do like to break down those fibers. Like a silverback gorilla is massive. It eats a lot of vegetables and leaves and stuff like that. Well, what happens is their bacteria breaks down that fiber and actually turns it into short chain fatty acids, particularly butyrate. So butter is like butyrate. So basically like these animals have gut bacteria that break down those fibers into butter effectively. So they're getting like
That's awesome.
Butter calories. Yeah. And we have the same system too, which is kind of cool. So like, when we get the right kind of fibers into our system, and these could come from fruits or certain kinds of vegetables, or straight just like psyllium or other kind of fiber supplements, apple or citrus pectins, like our gut bacteria love these things and they thrive. And when they're happy, we're happy. We have good immune defense. So I think whatever prioritizes someone's unique gut health is going to be good. I think most people will realize that they're going to do better by getting away from a lot of the grains, particularly non-organic grains. There's a big difference between having your wife's organic sourdough, which is a slightly fermented, probably super high quality flour, and eating just like a white flour that's sprayed with like Roundup glyphosate that's like bleached and a whole shit. Like, it's a world of difference.
Yeah, she uses, the amount of money she has to spend on flour to get, good flours. Crazy.
So when you're eating grains, it's all about the quality, and it's also all about like what individually people can tolerate. Like, I know when I eat wheat, I don't feel my best. Like, I wouldn't say I'm like celiac, but I feel like bloated, a little sluggish. If I eat too much rice, I don't feel like my best. I feel better if I can have sweet potatoes. I can do good with squashes. I do good with certain kinds of berries and fruits. But like, I'm not against like having fruit. People have really villainized fruit because it's like, oh my gosh, it's sugar. These things are full of so many beneficial phytochemicals, micronutrients, vitamins, minerals, and not all things massively spike your blood sugar. Like, your life is probably going to be better if you have some organic berries in it, or you have an organic apple once in a while and do something. Now, if you're just like slamming watermelons, eating bananas, and like eating dried dates and figs, like, that's not an optimal thing. We want to keep stable blood sugar, but fruits have their place. And I think if you're going to have them, the way to break your fast with them, they're a nice food because they wake up the GI tract. They have, good stuff for the bacteria. And again, animal food's the same story. Like, quality matters, especially when you're eating higher up on the food chain. So when you eat higher up on the food chain, things like cows or fishes or stuff like this, like what that animal ate matters too. These things are all bioaccumulators. So if you can get grass-fed, grass-finished beef, that's like better than the corn-fed kind of things. If you can get wild line-caught salmon, it's way better than farm salmon that needs to be colored because it's not eating a natural diet.
Yeah. You made an important distinction that I think a lot of people now, because the USDA and all the BS, and how things are organic and how things are cage-free, like cage-free poultry. Their only requirements for cage-free or to free range is they have to have a big gate in front of the door. Like, it's complete nonsense. Yeah. But when you talk about beef, we were actually just talking last night because we want to do like we'll probably buy a side of beef or a full beef here, and it's grass finished. So there's this distinction. Can you talk about the distinction between grass fed and grass finished? Because the grass fed is not necessarily much healthier than,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my understanding is like they can feed for the grass-fed designation because it's all politics. They can feed the animal grass for a certain amount of time, and then they have a period to basically fatten it up on corn before it's actually slaughtered and brought to the shelf. And so, like, ultimately, what the animal ate most recently, particularly the corn, which has a particular kind of fatty acid composition, which then makes its way into the fats that you end up eating with that particular beef and meat. You know, and that fat can either be inflammatory or anti-inflammatory. If it's coming from a grass-fed, grass-finished animal, grass all the way through its life cycle, it's going to have these beneficial anti-inflammatory fat-burning compounds like the CLA. It's not going to have as high omega-6 content, which is an inflammatory type of fat. So, yeah, I mean, where quality matters, which means you're going to inherently spend more. If it's like too cheap, you know, it's probably like not the thing. So I guess like if you're going to eat a diet that is largely meat-based, then like buy up for the good kind of stuff, I think is good. Good eggs, good beef. If you can hunt, or if you can get your own, get a full beef or half like you are doing, those are all great options.
Yeah, and I was actually surprised because for a half, it's $5, $5.50 a pound, which is
that's
what's
prices.
Costco ground beef is $5 to $5.50 at $5.99 right now. So like you have this concept that if I do this, and granted you have to have, you know, we have 4 freezers in our house, so we've got room for that stuff. And if you're in the big city, it's probably going to be harder for you to get to. But most middle America, you know, you've got access to these, you know, these kind of things. We're in Montana, so we're surrounded. I'm literally have cows right next door. So it's, you know, it's easy to get those things, but you know, it's obviously more expensive when you're buying it in the store. If you're buying all organic, grass finished, there's a ton of mail order things now that you can get that stuff delivered right to your house. So yeah, I mean, I was surprised that buying a half a beef or a full beef, which is, I mean, you're talking about, the investment's like $1,500, you know, but that's 300 pounds of meat.
But this is also what you're feeding yourself, your family, and your kids. I mean, like, is there anything more, like, there's not many things as foundational as like what you put in your body, if it's going to impact your energy, your mood, your disease risk down the line, how much you thrive. It's like a form of self-love. I mean, we can spend money on all sorts of crap. And like, this is like, so I guess there's a mental reframe on like how important it is to spend some more money on quality nutrition. And to get back to your broader question, like what's the overall nutrition philosophy? I guess it's to like eat a diet that is good for every individual's like gut function. If you're taking good, healthy poops, they're not sludgy, you're not bloated, they're coming out, don't require a ton of wiping, then you know you're eating a good diet that works well for your GI tract. If you're having GI issues, then it means something that you're eating or some kind of scenario is happening where there's inflammation and your GI tract is not working well and something needs to be optimized. And oftentimes it takes a degree of experimentation to pull things out, to get simple. So I think the cool thing is like these meat-based carnivore diets or stuff like that are a good way to like do an elimination and like get back to baseline, because people aren't typically reactive like this to animal proteins. And then you can start to add stuff in. But I guess like the best diet is like a largely non-processed, so like natural foods. It's a combination of fruits, vegetables, meats, eggs. For most people, I think a lot of people, especially based on certain racial origins. So like Asians, Black people, some Mediterranean people have sensitivities to dairy. It's unfortunate because cheese is freaking awesome. And it's coming from me as like I have both lactose intolerance as well as like a sensitivity to dairy. If you find that you eat cheese or eat certain things and you feel a little funky or you get a mucus reaction, you have some sensitivity to dairy proteins. So just be mindful of that. That doesn't mean you can't have dairy ever. It just means like it probably shouldn't be like a staple everyday thing for you if that's the case. And then there's also nuance in that. Like there's a difference between sheep's and goat's dairy. People often tolerate that better than a traditional like cow's dairy. And there's even variation in the type of cow and the dairy. So nutrition's freaking complicated because these are molecules that are interfacing with our immune system. And that's really complicated. But I guess like get the BS out. And then as it comes to behaviors, like what we like to do is have people like proactively plan a free meal every week. So pick a day, Friday or Saturday night, and like just know it's your free meal. Like have whatever you want. Like, and quite frankly,
we call them cheat meals, but free meals probably a better term. But yeah, I like by the time Friday gets here, if we're going out or we're going to go, you know, and we try not to go completely off the rails, but if we're going to do something that's a little bit, you know, I'm like, I can't wait.
Sure.
Especially if I'm cutting or,
Yeah.
trying to drop fat or whatever.
And that's a good habit, because like it's like it's in a sense it's like it's proactive, it's planned instead of reactive, and that's a massive difference. Two, it gives you the opportunity to like let loose and have all sorts of foods and enjoy all sorts of tastes, which is awesome. And then three, the next day, oftentimes, but not always, you wake up feeling a little bit like crap, and it's a good reminder again heading into the next week. That's like, oh yeah, that's why I don't eat as much pizza. Like,
it sounded like a good idea at the time, right?
It was delicious, but it makes you have that kind of internal dialogue. Like, was it worth it? And you're like, yeah, it was probably worth it, but I'm going to be good for a good amount of time. So it's like this kind of like punitive feedback loop that we can give ourselves to, which is cool. And then, it's just good. So proactively planning it once or twice a week is solid. I recommend more of a dinner than a breakfast, because I think like when you have that double pancake stack breakfast with the OJ and the cream on or whatever, like that can wreck you for the entire day, versus like dinner, you have your big dinner out and then you like go to sleep and you kind of shake it off.
Yeah. If I have a huge day plan, like I do a ton of construction work and all that, just taking care of the house. So I may have a bigger breakfast and then a bigger dinner that night too, on kind of that. And I don't make it, off the rails all day, but then I know that, and then I just feel fuller and I'm ready to go. But
yeah,
that's good advice for sure. So I want to talk, so basically the net of what you just said, which obviously is more complicated than this, is don't eat crap, cut out the crap first, get health foods, try to eat organic as much as possible and just clean things up. And then you can begin to fine tune.
Yeah. And then layer on the first part of that was standardize your first 2 meals of the day, right? I mean, standardize your breakfast to be those high quality eggs, standardize your lunch to be leftovers from your decent dinner the day before, or a high quality sandwich recipe, or a salad with protein. And then dinner can be like, we teach a framework for dinner called a perfect plate, where if like you look at a blank plate, white plate, fill it half of it with some kind of like fibrous vegetable you love. So that could be a little green salad mix, could be asparagus, could be broccoli, something that's just a little bit of fiber that you're okay and you tolerate and you can like good enough. Throw a little salt, throw a little butter on it, olive oil, like extra virgin olive oil if you want to be like really good about it. That's good for your gut microbiome. And then a quarter of that plate is protein and a quarter of it is healthy carbs. You can have sweet potato, you could have some little rice. And if the portions are there, it works out nicely. You have a lot of flexibility, and there's so many perfect plates we could do. It could be like taco night. You could have a little bit of rice with ground bison and like some sauteed vegetables. It could be salmon, asparagus, and and white rice with a little soy glaze. It could be chicken, sweet potato with some roasted veggies of some sort. Like many different options you can do that fit that framework. And if you really feel called to like drop the carbs altogether and you're just like, I want to go straight carnivore, then just like take out that quarter of the carbs and just increase the protein portion. Like that works too. So it's more of a frameworked approach than this is exactly what you need to eat. And the final thing I'll say on the nutrition is hydration is your through line. Water is your constant amigo, and you need to have a water bottle of some sort to actually drink water, because we're all busy. So like get a stainless steel guy, slam it in the morning or whatever you do it, and then just take something throughout the day. Drink water in between your meals. Don't drink water while you're having your meals to dilute those digestive enzymes. Like have a big meal, wait, chug a bunch of water, and then keep on going. But I think try to accumulate for most guys like 60 to 120 ounces a day. It depends on your activity level, but more water is typically going to make you feel better.
Yeah, and it kind of play with it. It's really weird, but if you play with the container, that sometimes can make a difference. Like for me, I use my blender bottle, like I'll have I tend to do like an amino energy drink, which has some crap in it, but that's better than coffee. I feel better about it. But like if I try to drink my water out of that same open top blender bottle, I won't drink nearly as much as if I put it in a straw based water bottle, which is sounds really weird, but like you can kind of play around with, I don't know what that is, but it seems to work a little bit better. So play around with what you put it in. So my wife ended up having SIBO, which I don't know how much of that you've dealt with, but it was a major. So if you don't know what that is, it's small intestine bacterial overgrowth. And it's basically your biome in your small intestine is completely screwed up. Took her forever to get rid of it. She had to end up doing that elemental diet.
Was she eating a lot of bars or fibers or like sweeteners, or like what do you think came from that?
We're not 100% sure whether it was like, I know antibiotics, whether she got sick and had antibiotics that went on it, but it took her a really long time and to deal with it. And the elemental diet is kind of and you're aware of this, but it's like a pre-digested, quote unquote, drink. And it tastes horrendous, made her sick. She had to do it for 21 days. And, my wife is kind of a badass. And so she was like, I'm not going to let this beat me. And she suffered through 21 days. But all that to say, having that healthy bio, that gut biome is so important to do it. And, it sounds gross, but like your poop is a really good
best indicator.
Like I can tell if I have less fiber or I miss my fiber supplement or whatever on the next day, because then I feel bloated. I feel terrible. I'm not going to the bath. My wife makes fun of me because I go to the bathroom a lot during the, I mean, it's just like, I just do it, but it's healthy. It works for me. My system works for me. But I wanted to ask you, and I've kept you for a really long time, but I wanted to ask you about so I do like a morning sauna. You mentioned the near IR. So these are, and I do kind of near IR lights. So I've got 6 near IR lights. I sit in there. I actually made it under my stairs in that there's a little closet underneath there. And it only gets like 115 degrees or 120. So it's not this super hot 185 degree traditional sauna. What, is that something that tends to be pretty beneficial? What I found, which is interesting, is during the wintertime, I'll tend to have a little bit of psoriasis or something like that on my skin. If I'm constant every day doing the sauna, I don't have it. But if I go a few days or if I'm out of town or whatever, it tends to flare up.
Yeah. I mean, the whole infrared spectrum is like just so beneficial. So there's near, mid, and far. You have the near, which is the wavelength that's closest to red visible light, but you can't see it. Does yours has red light with it or just it's?
Yeah, it does. They're the red light.
Yeah. So it's a red near IR combo, which are really good. Amazing, especially for like the near IR hits that topmost kind of layers of your skin. And it's really good for your mitochondria, which is like everything when it comes to your longevity and your ability to produce energy. So helps with mitochondria, helps with blood flow circulation, helps repair collagen, makes your skin look better. And like you have good looking skin. And I'm sure it's like, I don't know if that is improved since you've used that, but like,
I mean, I'm 1/8 Native American. So you'll see, I have like a red tint. My friends always make fun of me, but like I tan. This is a couple of hours in the sun. I don't like, I just tan really well, but I typically have pretty healthy skin overall.
Yeah. So it's great for that. Great for longevity, skin benefits, circulation. I mean, if everyone could get some kind of infrared exposure every day, it'd be good. Obviously the sun itself gives you some, but like being in front of those light panels, massive. I think the best times to do it are in the morning or in the evening. There's unique benefits to like both of those scenarios. So
my wife has this little IR mask that she wears that's like popular in the cosmetic industry and the makeup and all that, because we're both 50. And so, but that helps. And both of us look like we're in our, early 40s.
And people are taking collagen, right? Collagen's a big thing that people take and like good things for bone broths and all that's great. But like these lights actually have the wavelengths that stimulate natural collagen production on their own.
And they're relatively inexpensive. I mean, my whole setup for my basement was, $175 or something like that.
That's really good.
I mean, it's super cheap. You just buy the cheap Amazon. And I have this little morning guide thing that you can get on my website. But it kind of has some of those links in there. But it's like those old school metallic holders with the bulbs in them. And a couple of power strips, and it was super cheap. I think her little face thing was more expensive, probably because of how it's marketed, but it's also has a rechargeable thing and all that. So
nice.
But she wears it on her chest and she wears it on her face, to every night and get that IR. Speaking of sunshine, here's what I want to get your opinion about sunscreen. So I actually went to the dermatologist. So like I said, I'm part Native American. So my melatonin and, or not melatonin, my melanin, I have that red tint. I tan really easy. I don't burn, if I burn, it turns to tan within overnight. Yeah. I talked to my dermatologist about it and she's like, you never have to worry. I was like, do I have to worry about skin cancer? She's like, nope. Don't even worry about it. So her advice actually was not to use, and I know there's this kind of debate, but her advice is to not use sunscreen. And I typically don't. Because I want all the vitamin D, and I figure I'm probably more likely to get skin cancer from the crap that's in sunscreen than I am from the actual sun.
Yeah. All right. My take on that. I think it's like the main thing that we must understand is exactly what you said, that they have like massive individual genetic differences in terms of our skin composition and how the sun interfaces with us. Like for you, I would recommend you probably don't need sunscreen. I mean, maybe if you're working a really, really long day outside and it's just beaming down, I mean, I'd probably wear more like full coverage clothing and a hat or something like that and not wear sunscreen. You do get the benefits, obviously, of the vitamin D from the full sun. And a lot of those chemical sunscreens have the avobenzone, the oxybenzone, and some of these are just like not awesome things. They do have like mineral based sunscreens that use like zinc or titanium oxides that are more like
that's
reflective.
the old school. That's the old school nose thing of the
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with them is they don't like rub in and disappear. They're more like actually more of a barrier, like reflecting all these things. I think people who have fair skin, you know, Northern European descent, like absolutely should get some kind of sun protection or they're going to get destroyed. And it's the like, especially during the hot part of the day, middle part of the day when sun is high and overhead, it's kicking out a lot of UVA and UVB, and UVA is going to age your skin and UVB is the kind of the skin cancer kind of thing. I personally rarely use sunscreen unless it's a long day outside or I'm fishing or something like that, and I'll pop some on. But again, I think like the best time for most of us to get our sun exposure is really like in those earlier morning times where you're not getting a ton of UV exposure. And there's no need, in my opinion, to put sunscreen on early in the morning for that morning walk or the time. Midday, if you're outside for a protracted period, I think like if you can spend the first 5 to 20 minutes outside, like just without the sunscreen, then you're fine. But it's like two individual tolerance based on your skin type. Certain people, that's bad advice. And then certain people, like if you're African American, you can probably be, these numbers are irrelevant. You could be outside for much, much longer and you wouldn't necessarily need that. So it's not exactly a one size fits all prescription. I personally don't use much sunscreen, only if there's really long times and I know I'm just getting blasted.
Yeah, my daughter, we call her, I say, you're not white, you're transparent. Because like she is so white, which is ironic because she looks just like me, but she got none of my melanin, I guess. But so I don't want to keep you too much longer. I could talk to you all day, but so if some guys out there listening to this are like, yeah, I definitely want to get more fit. Maybe they're 20 pounds overweight, maybe they're 120 pounds overweight. Obviously, we all have to start somewhere and work with what we've got. When you first kind of, what is a good motivating ideology or statement or philosophy that you can give to kind of, take that first step?
Yeah. I mean, I mentioned it a little bit earlier. I think seriously setting aside like 5 or 10 or up to 30 dedicated minutes with like a pen and paper or talking through someone if you're not the kind of writing down type of person, and like doing a deep reflection and inventory, being super honest and getting some self-awareness about like where you're stuck, where you're trapped, what kind of habits and rhythms are you just stuck in the same kind of rut? Like, why does this actually matter to you? What your core values are? How does your health and your behaviors connect to them? What would you ideally want to accomplish? What do you want to avoid? And like dumping that stuff on paper and gaining emotional clarity on that front. It would be like the most valuable thing someone can start off in this podcast because from there, once you're there, you're like, holy crap, I see that I'm like actually massively out of alignment with what I say my core values are. I can now tell from this conversation that I'm heading down a path that like I'm going to have to dig myself out of a hole. And when I'm 50, might as well do it now when I'm 40 or start. Or if you are 50, then you know that like 60 is going to look freaking rough if you don't like get these pain out of your joints. You know that being 30 pounds overweight is not great for your knees. You know your mood's not very good and you want to ideally like have a life that feels fulfilling 10, 15 years from now. And obviously your weight has something to do with that. Like get a grasp and get real. Like know thyself, take the time to do a little bit of that reflection. And then from there, this would be like the shameless plug would be like, come check out fitfatherproject.com. Go to our YouTube channel, read our case studies and get inspired by what's possible when you commit to a system where you don't have to do the thinking. It's like, I love this analogy. It's like the best athletes in the world, they have coaches like Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan. They have shooting coaches, dribbling coaches, defensive coaches, because they can be the athlete. You can step into the arena, you can do the execution, and you can have someone who can provide some outside guidance and perspective. Same thing with weight loss. Like every guy listening to this, you're already the boss, the CEO of your life and your family. You're managing all these other things. And if this is an area that you're deficient in and struggling in, you don't have to be the one to figure all this stuff out. You can actually just take some humility and be like, okay, I know this is an area I want to focus on. Let me like use a plan from someone who's like walked thousands of guys through this where it's all figured out, and just take it and run with it. Even if it's a 30-day experiment, right? Like even if it's, you can commit to 30 days of trying something new, like that's real action. That's real traction. So it's a mix of both the mind, the heart, and the clarity of the plan. Like that's the combination that gets results. Like you growing this podcast, I'm sure it was the same kind of thing. You connected with like your mission of why you actually want to take the time to like create this setup, record, invite all the guests. So there's an emotional component. And then there's also a logistical component. You had to like figure out who knows what the best camera and mic
Right.
is. Why do I pick this recording software? So you probably read and you figured out what the plan was. And then you like iterated and you took action, and then you bought certain things. Oh, that's good. That's not. Same exact thing with this fitness journey. Like it starts with the emotion and the heart. You only have to do that once. It takes 30 minutes. And, you know, you do that once and you start to get that clarity and that power. And then you got to channel that power into a plan. And you do that and you get some tangible actions this week, man, you're off to the races. You're in the fight. And I promise you, you can astonish yourself at what you can accomplish in 6 months.
Yeah.
Like it may seem like we've had guys lose literally in 9 months. We had a guy lose 100 pounds.
Wow.
So like, that's like not typical. And most guys don't have that weight to lose, but in 6 months, if you have 30 to 50 pounds to lose, that shit can be completely gone. And not only gone, you could have the habits in place to keep that off for life. You could be dramatically more fit, and you might even be off any prescription medications in that amount of time. And that might have taken you 10 years to get there. So that's like the promise of like the reversal. It's not easy, but it can be relatively quick.
And how good you're going to feel is pretty amazing. There's one thing that I learned as a trainer that I think a lot of people misunderstand. I've been on your website. The before and afters are really amazing. If you're 40, 50, 60, 70, your body, even though it's more difficult, the metabolic and physiological response to weight training, eating right, losing weight, stays the same. It's the same. I had this guy, this man that was 91 years old that I trained, and this was back in the mid 90s, late 90s. When I first started working with him, he literally could not, if he was in a prone position, if he was laying down, he could not physically get up from that position without, doing a rollover and kind of taking forever. We worked with him for probably 4 or 5 months. And like the dude was doing full push-ups, he was doing planks, he could do crunches. Like it was just a matter of getting him moving and doing those things. I have a 92-year-old neighbor, cuts his own lumber. He's out there every day in his tractor. I'm pretty sure he may outlive me, but like those kind of, and then I contrast that with other men in their 70s, and you're like, dude, are you just waiting to die? Like you're feeble and you're skinny fat and all of those, all of those things, and you look miserable. Like you're not a healthy person.
Yeah.
So all that to say, it doesn't matter really where you're starting from. Start from where you are, and the results that these guys are getting at the fit that you are getting, fitfatherproject.com, it's pretty amazing. Because like for me, if you go to my website, I got kind of the before and after. I dropped from 12% body fat down to 7% body fat. That's only 5 or 6 pounds. But it's still a lot of work, but there's a little bit of a difference when you're starting at 11 or 12 percent body fat versus I'm 80 pounds overweight, right? But it's the same principles, I would think. So,
and I'll say our program is designed to like progressive. Like we take guys from like from like lean to ripped, and we take guys from like completely out of shape to getting in shape to getting lean. Like it's completely progressive. You can find yourself on this journey. And the other thing I'll say too is to that picture of the old debilitated guy in the 70s versus like your active outdoors 90-year-old neighbor. We look around right now, and many of us like aging parents, if your parents are still alive, if they've not passed, like the cognitive decline and dementia rates are going insanely high. And this is completely due to our nutrition and our lifestyles.
Yep.
Exercise, muscle mass, hormone protection is huge for cognitive health. Testosterone levels for men, huge for cognitive health. Those AGEs, that sugar, which is all of our nutrition, is going to be determined whether or not you have a brain that's full of sticky plaques and sugars, or whether it's a brain that is still young, learning, happy, spry. Like it's determined by our choices. That's just how God set this up. Consequence due to our actions. And
And
so
I'll give you a
control of it.
test. I'll give you a testimonial though. So that same 92-year-old neighbor was a pastor for 40 years. So he goes to our church now, is no longer a pastor. He's retired, long since retired, but he does guest. He will preach as a guest, and people could not believe he did a 25-minute sermon a couple of Sundays ago. No notes, no iPad, no cards, 100% from memory, quoting scripture that he learned 55 years ago. And so like, if you contrast that to, there's people in my life that are like, oh, it's just, I'm in my 70s now and I just can't remember anything anymore. But they don't exercise, they don't eat right, all that. So it's like, it's difficult, but it's not hard, right? Like it's a pretty simple equation.
And it becomes intrinsically motivating, as you've mentioned a few times, right? Once you get on it, like you feel weird when you don't exercise. You feel like, and so it takes a bit to get there. Or maybe you already are on that frame and you have good habits in place. And it's like, this is even more motivation to like accelerate, lean into those things. And now it's even more important for you, let alone, we haven't even mentioned too much about our kids. Like they're modeling our behaviors constantly. And we're creating like what their perception of like normal and good is. And if you have kids right now that are actually overweight and unhealthy and you're listening to this, like,
which is probably a huge percentage of the people that are listening,
your kids, I'm not trying to sound mean here, but like overweight kids are going to be more tired, more distractible, lower IQ, less emotional regulation. And the fat cells they create when they're younger, particularly under 13, stay with them for the rest of their lives, making it easier for them to be overweight in adult life and harder for them to keep it off. We have kids right now who are in their teens that have diabetes. Literally diabetes, right? I mean, and which is destroying their organ function. Their kidneys are getting destroyed at a young age, livers, their brains are being glycated. So it's just not just like cute fat. It's like our kids are being fed crap foods too. So like what we're doing is affecting subsequent generations as well, let alone our most loved ones. So that's super important. And I'll take it one step kind of more pointed, that if you have a kid that's under 10 and they're fat, that's your fault. I mean, like in my opinion, that's a very, at least in some part, or not your fault, but it's something that you have a definitive control over. We were out on their intake.
We were out on the trail doing some jeeping a couple of weeks ago, and this, two families showed up in some side-by-sides, and it was, 4 adults and there was probably 6 kids, and all of them, every single individual was grossly overweight, down to like a 6 or 7-year-old that probably weighed more than I do. And it's like, man, it's just generational, and that will continue on and on and on until, somebody makes the change.
And it's normalized, right? And I'll say this too, like the connection between adiposity, the food you eat, and your IQ is super strong. The better you eat, the sharper you are.
Yeah.
Especially for your kids, and your kids' ability to be sharp is going to be continue competitive advantage for them to create a good life for themselves. Like, absolutely. So is you want the smartest kid you possibly can have, and their nutrition's a big factor in that.
Yep. Nutrition, exercise, good sleep, all of those things, the same for little kids as it is for adults. And, that's how you make a difference. So fitfatherproject.com. And they just go to find Fit Father Project on YouTube as well to kind of look at your YouTube stuff.
It's great. Subscribe there. We have hundreds of videos, good stuff on the YouTube channel. And then we have our free meal plan that lays out a good, healthy day of eating on our website, as well as free workouts. You can find places to get that.
Awesome. And I'm kind of a coach, but I kind of need a coach too. So I might check out what you do and see if you can get me down to 6% body fat next. So
love it. Love it.
Hey man, I really appreciate you taking the time. You guys have a much bigger following than me, and you're a lot farther along on this process. So taking the time to help educate, our smaller audience and some of the people we're trying to reach, I really appreciate you doing that.
My pleasure. And we'll share this out to our community too, because I want people to know about what you're doing, Kevin. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much, Anthony.
If you're looking to really maximize your life and become the man you were made to be, head over to maxedoutman.com and get your journey started today.